Oilers Live Podcast.
Welcome to Oilers Live Podcast. I've got as my guest tonight, I've got Marcus, who I know as one of the good followers on Twitter. You can find him at Sport Major. He is, as those of you that follow Oiler Twitter know, he's a Washington Capitals fan living in Edmonton. Welcome to the show, Marcus.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. It's good timing. We've, just finished the trade deadline, so you and I get to have the first post episode of what was a rather uneventful deadline. I mean, everybody's got their thoughts on the Oilers' moves, and then you probably have your thoughts on the lack of move, maybe for the Capitals. But first, let's hear a little bit about yourself. How long you been in Edmonton for, Mark?
I came out here in the fall of '08, so just in time to kind of sort of see the whole downfall after your post-Stanley Cup run there in '06. And, it's been very enlightening. And to tell you, coming from Southern Ontario, where, as you can imagine, Leaf Nation runs amok, there are some similar tendencies out here, as I guess we'll get into later on, is in terms of, let's just call it the perception of your players versus what they may be versus the rest of the league.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear what your opinion is, given that you're not an Oilers fan per se. But I do know, following you.
I'll say this much before I get tomatoes thrown at me. I'll say this much. Again, I've been here for this long. I rarely miss an Oilers game. The only time usually is if the Caps game's on, and I'll watch the Oilers games after. So I'm just coming at it. I guess the best word would be an unbiased opinion, but that being said, this is a good debate, and certainly the Oilers are a good club to talk.
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of things to talk about, especially when they're not doing well. Just about you, Marcus. You're from Southern Ontario, so you're not from Washington, or are you originally?
No, grew up in Kingston, Ontario, so quite a hockey hotbed back there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Obviously the big names, Gilmore and Muller, come to mind off the top of my head, but you got our Neil, Jay McClements. I went to high school with Andy Sutton. A lot of Oilers fans here probably recall him. He's 6'6", 240-pound defenseman. I went to high school with him, played football and rugby and hockey, and he's a big fella. But I'll tell you this much, actually, quick side note on that. Andy was not let me just say this much, he was not a physical guy in high school. That may come to a lot of surprise to people here, but playing football and rugby, as you can imagine, you'd think he'd be demolishing people. But really, it wasn't until he took off to Michigan Tech and started learning how to hit on skates and took off from there. But yeah, so growing up in Kingston, obviously, I was able to make connections with a lot of hockey players and still do to this time. I mean, I working for the Oxford Generals for a couple of years, and on top of that, sort of spread my wealth, so to speak.
So you got to tell me, how does a guy from Kingston end up being a Capitals fan?
Well, as I said, just growing up in Kingston area, watching a lot of the Ontario Hockey League. So at the time, they were the Kingston Canadians. I think people now will know them more as the Kingston Frontenacs. But back then, I used to have season tickets, and like a lot of us, go down to the rink and watch. As much as Kingston was my favorite team, there's always other guys you like to see. And back then, you only got to see them once or twice whenever they come into your city. And back then, in 1982, and the Kitchener Rangers were coming to town. I happened to be there that night, and I happened to watch Scott Stevens, demolish two guys in big body checks. I forget who it was that he beat the snot out of, and scored 2 goals. And I was hooked on Scott Stevens, not moving on. So, fast forward to the draft the following year, where the Capitals took him, and first game as a Capital, first shot, first goal, and Capitals wanted to make the playoffs that first year he was there. So I was hooked.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not. You and I have had our discussions on Twitter about the Capitals, and their struggles to kind of go anywhere beyond the first or second round, I guess. But they year over year 98. They 90. and I've actually come to know that exactly what successes they've had for as long back as you can remember. We have some similarities.
I'm screaming 98 like it was some type of success, but I think if you'll recall, yeah, we made the Stanley Cup finally, and then we lose to Detroit 4-0.
Well, and it's funny because that's how you and I first started chatting. I think on Twitter was you suggesting to me that my complaints were heard, but you didn't feel bad for me because you had your own.
No, I go to work every day and I don't feel bad for anybody. The playoffs this year, or the last 10 years. Do I like it? Would I rather they play better? It's better for me to go watch games down at the rink, but. The bottom line is that if you want to go over a quick history of who's had bad luck, start with the Washington Capitals. Now, that's nothing I want to win, but that's a fact. I mean, how many Stanley Cups do you guys need in the city anyway?
Well, I think we'd settle for one more.
Yeah, oh yeah, no doubt. Now, you got the Golden Boy, though, right?
That's right. We've got the Golden Boy.
There's the other side of it. You got Gretzky and McDavid. Again, what hockey gods are not looking down on you guys?
So you got to feel that way about Pittsburgh as well, right? I mean, that's got to be, we're the Pittsburgh of the West, right? As Pittsburgh is, the Edmonton of the East, right? In terms of luck and just generational talent, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to make me have to say nice things about the Pittsburgh Penguins, but, it's not, they're a quality organization, have been, so you got to tip your hat. Now, the bottom line is that this, to me, and I was being a Caps fan, I'm trying to be unbiased here, but the Pittsburgh Penguins are not Sidney Crosby. I think you'll understand my point I'm making here. I mean, even going back to 2009 in the big series, it really was Malkin was the difference, and he really should have won the MVP, in my opinion. And goaltending is really just like anything. It's not. I'm not complaining the Capitals run into hot goaltenders in the playoffs. That's what happens when you lose. Generally, losing to a hotter goaltender and. Many examples, the best one being Halak probably in 2009-10, but there's other ones, and it happens. So, it's tough going for that team, but at the same time, I'm not going to feel bad for other teams when they run into bad luck or have bad calls goes against them or, interference calls or whatever. It happens to all teams. I guess that's my main point.
Yeah, and I guess that's exactly it, right? I mean, everybody's going to have all sorts of ups and downs as a league. Do you as a Capitals fan being in Edmonton, what and it being just after the trade deadline, do you remember what the last trade is that the Capitals and the Oilers made?
Is it Pody?
No. Although that was a trade, it was Garrett Stafford for Dane Byers, so it wasn't much of a trade at all. But yeah, I forgot about the Pody trade.
Was that Capitals and Oilers, or was it just am I getting that? You obviously played for both, but I'm just trying to remember if there's a trade there.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I remember Tom Pody well, but before I got you on, I thought, wow, a trade deadline. I thought I'd look back. The Caps and the Oilers have only made like a couple trades together. Actually,
what about, hold on, I think I know now. Hold on. What about the former big rig? What Penner?
Mike Greer.
2013 trade deadline or 12 maybe it was.
Did Penner go to Washington? Okay, well let's check this out. So for those of you that don't know, there's a great website called NHLTradeTracker.com, and you can go there, check by trades by player, trades by team, and basically what I did was I just went back through the they did end up getting Penner. Penner was a 3-team. Looks like they acquired Penner from Anaheim in March 4th of 2014.
Oh, so so Penner went from here to Anaheim. Is that what happened?
Nope. Penner went from Anaheim to the Cap for a 4th-round pick, 2014. Now that's interesting, right? Because we're going to talk about this, the trade deadline today. You go back, and a lot of people would, I think, do a comparable of Penner to Maroon. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've thought about that. That's that's fair. I think I'm trying to think of the numbers here. Yeah.
Yeah,
On the surface, that's a fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think and some of the things about.
Sorry, at the time, obviously, I don't think Penner has sustained that. Well, I mean, it's given now. Maroon has a lot more sustainability in his career.
Yeah. Yeah, and Penner was, of course, he went by all sorts of nicknames, none of them very complimentary. Dustin Penne was the one that I remember the best, but certainly, yeah. And, him and Phil Kessel, had the same diet, I think. Kessel's certainly far more successful. But Penner was always had that moniker. I think, though Maroon had that sort of prior to coming to Edmonton. That was kind of the thing about him. They were saying he was a bit lazy. I think he proved otherwise. Ended up being, reasonable. He went for a fourth rounder to Edmonton. Maroon did initially, right? So I think I caught some of your stuff on Twitter just regarding that, this in the last couple of days. And I mean, to be realistic, I mean, I'm not suggesting that they could have got a lot more for Maroon. I think if they would have traded him earlier, they may have. That being said, I don't know what people were expecting to get back, to be quite honest. Yeah, I think probably the most disappointing thing, and we can just get right into it, the trade deadline as a whole. And let's, we might as well start with the Oilers. I look at what the moves are they made this year, right? Maroon out, Davidson out, Letestu out, and they got 3 third-round picks, right? And
which they need.
Two prospects. Yeah. So, if you take it as a whole, I think that you got more for Letestu than you expected. Davidson, I think, is a wash. I think the problem with a guy like Davidson and a fan base is he's a likable kid, right? He's got a baby face. He's, when he does have a good game, which was not all the time, although people would like to think that he was having a good game every game, but he was so likable. But when he did have a good game, he was noticeable out there. He had a good hit. He was good at hitting. But a third round pick, I mean, that's I think that's great. Yeah. Great return. Yeah. So overall, depending on what was offered for Maroon, and if Chiarelli's to be believed, he got one offer, and it was 5 minutes before the deadline. I'd love to know if that's true or not. By the way, I'm not going to take it one way or the other, but I don't think he did as bad.
Chiarelli said something to the same effect as well. I believe the Flyers, I think, or who was that? I think it was Chiarelli. I mean, I see no reason for that to be. If anything, I think maybe he's even shielding Pat Maroon, for that matter. If he's suggesting that he could have got more or less. I mean, what he's basically saying is that's what I could get for you, rather than he was shopping around like essentially they are the piece of meat. So I think he was actually shielding Pat Maroon, to be honest with you, by making that statement.
Yeah, and I think probably part of the complaint from Oilers fans right now is it's the same two guys, Shiro and Snow. Had he made that trade with any other team, I don't know that it would have been looked on with as much disdain as it was, because it was the Devils, and of course everybody's got Taylor Hall in their head.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that some of this has to be looked at too, is not on the player, and I think we touched on this on Twitter the other day, and I've lived it for the last 10 years, and it hasn't gone well, as you can imagine, in DC. But the Oilers are going to have to find out here is that you're not going to be able to. You can't look at this team anymore, respectfully as I think you mentioned earlier, likable guys or whatever. That's great, but this is going to come down to cap crunch, and obviously I don't need to tell you guys what's going to happen here in the next year or two with McDavid and Draisaitl's contract. You got Nurse coming up. You're going to have to be paying your goalie more than $3.5 million, whether it's Talbot or anybody else, 2-3 years from now, if you really want to get far. I mean, all these things are coming to a point where the reason Davidson gets moved is nothing. May not have, I don't know, but it may not have anything to do at all with how he's playing. It has to do with his cap hit of 1.5 next year that they're going to have to put somewhere else. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to here over the next 2 or 3 years. So you got to look more for me over the next 2 or 3 years of your ongoing cap, as the horizon's always changing, I think I said. So, you just can't get married to the players. The bottom line is you're going to have your core. And I think we touched on this the other day, did we not?
We sure did, yep.
So I think we saw the list. I know I'm just being a little bit, I'm not trying to pick on the individual there, but I mean, you can't have a core of 11 people. I mean, you only have 18 guys out there. So at the end of the day, if you have your core, and I'm not going to debate who that is or isn't in Edmonton. I have some of my displeasures with some of these guys on the team, but that being said, to me, it's McDavid, Draisaitl, Nurse, and whoever your goalie is. Beyond that, you cannot be getting married to these players. Whether it's Nugent Hopkins, whether it's Clefbaum, whether it's, and by the way, I think Clefbaum's on his way out in the summer too. But again, before I get hammered on Twitter, as much as I think he struggled this year, I think everybody knows that. Is he better than that? Sure. But it's his contract and the fact that he's valuable. And he's the only one that can move. Unless someone can take those other contracts off their hands, that's the bottom line. And they need to get another guy in here that can play right-handed defense.
So
who's going to leave, right?
Yeah, and that's a perfect question. I think while we have you today, you bring an interesting perspective. If we take the playoffs out of it, and I know that's the sore spot for Caps fans, but if you take the playoffs out of it, this is a team that's had regular season success going back quite a ways. What do you think is different about Washington versus what are some of the glaring differences that you see in an organization like the Capitals? Of course, Ovechkin makes all the difference in the world, but take Ovechkin out of it because, yeah. But what are some of the major differences? What do you see the Capitals have done right regular season-wise?
Well, bottom line is drafting and developing players. So, and I don't necessarily mean that to say that everybody you draft has to play in the NHL. The first year they get out of the the minors or the Western League or the OHL, Quebec, wherever they're coming from. The Capitals have been able to maintain a constant fluctuation of players who they can call up and bring up to the club that are not coming right up from junior. I mean, we could go back to John Carlson and Carl Alzner. I mean, people know these guys now of perennial defensemen. I mean, Alzner's taking a turn here. That's why the Caps got let him go. Yeah. But these guys all played for the Hershey Bears. I mean, they didn't just come right out of junior. And that's the problem the Oilers have had here since I've been here, quite honestly. I mean, it goes back to Cogliano and who's the other young Gagne. I mean, when I first got here, everybody was talking like Stanley Cup with these two. Like, let's just put the brakes on here. Like, so, I see one thing is yes, developing players. And that doesn't, again, mean everybody you draft is going to be the player, but the development of your player, i.e. the asset, needs to be turned into something. So I don't see the Oilers have drafted, developed, traded, let walk away. I mean, it's hard to do when you have so many different general managers and coaches coming and going. I get that. But until they get any structure coming up through the system, and that's going to take 2 or 3 years, quite honestly, because you can't have 18 and 19-year-olds coming up. Like Yamamoto was supposed to be some superstar in this team this year. He shouldn't even been here for any of the games, quite honestly. It's not because of his ability. He was never going to play here all year. So but the team does it, and this is why I'll get to my point, I think, here in a sec. The team does it because of the notoriety. And I don't think it has a lot to do with whether it's Washington, D.C. or St. Louis or Nashville. I mean, yeah, sure, Nashville was great in the Stanley Cup Final. But Nashville is not like Edmonton in August and September and October 8th or, November 2nd when the Oilers are playing, the Florida Panthers and there's an interference call that was called wrong. And what happens the next day in this city compared to those cities? And so everything gets blown up. And what happens is I think, and this is sad to say because I think you see it happen in other organizations, and we can look at Toronto, look at the long-term trap they've put forward, right? Well, what it is, I believe, is everything is under such a microcosm that not only are you guys playing Stanley Cup games in April, you're doing it in September. And when you're doing that, you're basing players now on too short of a window. So, Everly has a bad 10 days last playoffs, and that's the best argument people can come up with. I mean, the guy scored 25 goals a year, but now we want to get rid of him because in 10 days he didn't show up. It's now, everything's just... It's too microcosm. There's too much decisions made because of the fan base and the pressure and everything that's put on the organization. Fair enough. I mean, they need the money to play, and people are giving them that money. But in any Canadian city, that's why, it's not just Edmonton, but in any Canadian city, put it this way, though. Edmonton, I think, being in both markets, I'll tell you this much about Edmonton. Toronto is bad and for the things we're talking about. But remember, Toronto has 4 other sports franchises. Vancouver has 4 other sports franchises. Now, Winnipeg, and they haven't had the history the Oilers have had recently, aside, what else is here in Edmonton? Let's be real. The Eskimos, but the seasons don't collide. And I think the first thing on a paper, if it was between the Eskimos and the Oilers, we all know the answer there. So everything is on the Oilers. And I just think the pressure is there. And it's not, whether it's playing or whether it's on management or with the coach is trying to win every night like it's the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. That is not a recipe for winning next year or 2 years from now. And that's the disconnect between the GM and the coach right now. You can't have Draisaitl and McDavid playing together. Now, I think people are finally coming to realize that, but you'll know I've spoken on this all season long. And the other reason for that is if you look... Yeah, and you look at this last year when they played them together. Yeah, look, they got them to the Cup, or into the finals, the playoffs. The problem with that is, though, but it wasn't helping them move ahead because they're all trying to win right now. Because now you got a guy in McDavid who you need to start taking face-offs. You can't be 40% and supposed to be on the ice for half the game. It's not going to, long-term, it won't happen. He can get away with it more than other players because he does take the puck away more than others. But let's be honest, he's got to use energy to go get the puck. And when he has to use energy to get the puck, he's not using energy in the offensive zone to score. And that's the only guy doing it on the team. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I would say that Draisaitl's doing it now. Like he might have started slow, but certainly been a bit of a powerhouse as of late. But you can't have just two guys, right?
No, that's fair. But you got to have them. They got to be operating his own lines. You can't have
absolutely
12.5, $8.5 million, and then trying to fit Nugent Hopkins up there just because you don't have another winger. Like that's another story. But he's not a winger. And the day Leon Draisaitl signed his $8.5 million deal, which is $1.5 million more than everybody thought he was going to get, was the day Nugent Hopkins' contract became. We got to get rid of it. It's not about Nugent Hopkins. I don't want to hear, well, he scores this or he shoots there or he's a good power play guy. First of all, the power play is not good. And, penalty kill, he's a great two-way forward. Well, we don't need to talk about the penalty kill. I'm just saying it's not about Hopkins' play. It's simply you can't have a $6 million guy in the third line. So then you say, well, great, he'll play first line like David. So you're going to go through another year hoping and wishing that somebody who's never done something before is going to do it well. And before I hear he plays with McDavid, he'll score. Sure he will. That's the problem. Everybody will score with McDavid. So go get a real winger, and then you can get a third-line center. You're not paying $6 million. I bet you guys would like Lars Eller at $3.5.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a point that's missed so often, right? Is whoever you put on McDavid's line, right, is going to get points.
Look at his points. Does his points go up or down?
Yeah, no, they don't, and people don't. They can't seem to get that understanding, right? That in the first, actually, the problem I've got is McClellan doesn't seem to have that understanding either, right? He seems to why are you trying to
win tonight?
Yeah, well, yeah, but and why are you trying to ignite a player that's already ignited? Like he's you can't spark McDavid because he's already sparked. He's ready to go. You put Draisaitl on a second line, and then when you're playing San Jose, who's Burns going to play against? Right? Well, you can't play. You can't play the whole game, right? So you've got two great lines.
First-hand knowledge. Like Ovi and Backstrom were a one-line team for let's just say probably it was Backstrom's first year 07, so I'd say for about 3 years there until he got about 09, 10. They were a one-man team. Yeah, they were great, and they were fun to watch. But once you got into playoffs and the minutes started getting reduced and you had lines just equaling out each other, what would happen? The first, second line, generally speaking, outweigh each other, and the Caps, their depth would never be good enough. Now, in the last few years, they changed that. And, for the love of God, I don't know why they didn't win the last 2 years, but on paper, they were one hell of a team. And there's no weak point on any rate of them last year. The bottom line is they ran into Fleury. What are you going to do?
Yeah, no, and that's true. What do you think? We're past the deadline. Capitals didn't do much. They made a trade. About a month ago now, right?
Are you talking Kempney and?
Yeah.
Kempney and I'm trying to think the other fellow's name that just played last night now, because he's similar to the Oilers' name. I got them confused. The Jabek or
Derabik was.
Yeah, so he played last night. He's wearing Simmons' old number.
Yeah, that's right. And but outside of that, I mean, they, I think, and they didn't give up. They gave up some trades, I guess, or some picks, but I don't think they gave up a lot to, really gain a little bit of extra on their team. Have you watched them since? Have these guys played? I know Kempney scored in his first shift, didn't he?
Well, actually, no. I'm not sure. I think I mentioned that, and I know he never scored. He was actually on the ice for -1, but I think he got a tip shot or something like that. But, I mean, Kempney's looked good. The bottom line is Madison Valley and Christian Juice, 2 rookies this year in the Caps back line. This is the first time in over 20 years the Capitals have had 2 rookies on their blue line. And before everybody jumps over Holtby or the fact the Capitals are giving up more goals, you got to factor into the fact they got 2 rookies on their defense. Remember I talked about the depth up and coming? Now these guys are rookies. Now, could you imagine if they had never played in the AHL? So both these guys have been grooming for 2 years. Now, having said that, Bowie is, I'm pretty high, still am on Madison Valley. But, he's had his struggles, and Christian Juice, other than a couple defensive errors, that guy's going to be a gem. But they're rookies. So to bring in Kempney and Jared Beck, it's just going to be a little bit of veteran presence and some depth. And I'm just, would I rather they went and got, Eric Carlson? Sure. But to be honest with you, Ryan McDonough was the guy. And if they weren't going to get him, then I see no reason to go out and maybe possibly lose a Burakovsky or Jacob Barana or something like that, unless you're getting Ryan McDonough, because, Eric Carlson was not solving the Capitals' problem. They don't have a problem scoring goals. They got a problem keeping out their net.
So let's bring this, as it relates kind of to the Oilers, because I think this is a different perspective that Oilers fans don't get to see, right? As here's a guy like yourself that knows another team, but watches the Oilers as much or more than most Oilers fans. What's the view of Caps fans out there of their GM and their coach? I mean, as well as I do, right, that everybody would like to see Chiarelli's head on a platter. I'm in the boat of more of a wait and see on Chia, but I'm certainly not happy at all with the coaching this year. That's my opinion. A lot of people disagree. Well, not a lot, but there are some that do. What's your thought? As you relate it back to a team that what do Caps fans feel about Brian McClellan today?
It's interesting you say that, because it's such a night and day thing where people, they want to, one day they feel one way, next day they get up, and unless something's changed, and that's wrong. Sometimes it's moves you don't make, right? I mean, if we would have brought in somebody, let's just take. I think McDonough would have worked under the example I'm giving. But let's just say we took Eric Carlson, because there was some some talk of him potentially coming to Washington. Sure, if he had came here, and I think they could have worked it the money wise. I do believe that. But having said that, if he comes here, John Carlson is gone in the summertime. I mean, he walks in that door, that means John Carlson's walking out. So unless you trade that guy, I don't know if that's such a good thing for your dressing room. And I'm not so sure Eric Carlson is the answer for the Washington Capitals to win this year. Again, they already have a defenseman in the top 5 in scoring. He's already playing for him right now.
Yeah.
So in terms of in Brian McClellan not doing anything, I think there are some people like myself who let's just stay the course. Not so much because they gave up so much last year, because last year they loved the guy, right? But, because they didn't win, now all of a sudden the trades didn't work. Well, at the end of the day, they gave up Zach Sanford in the first-round pick and Copley. Well, they got Copley back. Zach Sanford got replaced by Jacob Barana. And the first-round pick, Caps are deep. They didn't really lose it. It's not like they blew the tank. I don't get that when people speak like that. They made a run for it, and why wouldn't they? So at the end of the day, I think people are 50-50 just because of what happened last year. I mean, but what are you going to do? I mean, nothing's guaranteed, right? So the other point to that maybe with here is the coaches. Now, there's a little more similarities there. Now, I don't know if you can catch where I'm going with this, but, look at McClellan's record and who he coached and what their success was before he came here. Now, he's not even getting the regular season success here, but my point is he never took the San Jose Sharks to the promised land, right? Well, what did Barry Trotz not do with the Nashville Predators, and what happened when he left?
Yeah, good point. Good point. Right? I'd never really put that together, and it's identical to what's happening right now for sure.
Right, and Trotz and McClellan are the same coaches. I mean, I agree here. I don't understand his propensity to go with some of these vets. I mean, we can talk about Lucic if you like in a sec, but Trotz is the same way. He plays Steve Chason over Verana or Steve Chason over like Chandler Stevenson's been a hell of a rookie this year. Another guy who's come up to this, and he continues to play Chason, right? And the same, like Brooks Orpik is Milan Lucic. It's just he's a defenseman, plays for the Capitals. It's the same thing. A big contract. He can't get around the ice. He still makes his hits and he'll block shots. I think he's a depth seventh guy for us, but he's playing fourth line, third line minutes. So it's a disconnect. These sometimes I don't get it. So to me, there's a lot of similarities in the coaches, and I think they're both gone in the summer. I'll say that right now, unless the Caps win the cup, but I'm not counting on them.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I hope you're right on terms of the McClellan front, because I'm just not a big fan, and the stubbornness seems to be there. And you can be stubborn in the regular season and get the playoffs, if you have a good enough team, right?
You can. And, the coach of the year is awarded for the regular season, not the playoffs. Coaching in the playoffs changes. It takes more out. It takes you more to coach a team, to be quite honest with you, like the Capitals were last year, to go through January and February, or the year before that, or maybe 09-10 is a better example. They were winning 14 to 15 games in a row. I mean, that you got to keep guys motivated. That's hard to do, right? So when the playoffs come, there's less coaching going on. Quite honestly, they shorten their benches, and away you go.
So if you're going and you're taking coaches out, right? Is there somebody sort of on the list that you think would be a good pickup for an Oilers franchise that seems to be struggling in that department? Anybody that comes to mind for you? I mean, I can't think of who's even available right now, to be fair, but I can tell you who some of the coaches that have gone that maybe should have given a bit of a better chance.
Well, I think bring Sutter.
Yeah,
I've heard people mention that. Would he last 5 years? Who cares? But this team needs a turnaround, and it's not going to start with McClellan and the GM being in a disconnect and how this team's going to move forward. You can't have a coach coaching the way he is and yet have a GM trying to build a team over the next 3 years. Or you got to get rid of both of them. But you can't have what's going on now.
Yeah, no, you might be right.
It was telling in the Chiarelli interview there after the presser when I think it was Rashad that asked the question with regards to 93 playing center and he dodged it. And then when he was asked directly whether or not he feels he can play the wing, all he said was he has. I mean,
he said he has, and then he ended the interview. That was it.
And so, so what does that tell you, right? I mean, if I'm reading between the lines, Nugent Hopkins is getting traded. Now, whether the coach wants that or not, I don't think it matters, because I think we all agree here, before Chiarelli goes, the coach is going. So unless the GM is going, there's going to be a new coach here, and it's not going to be the same playing style, so to speak. When I speak of that, I'm saying McDavid playing with Draisaitl, or for that matter, having 93 play on a wing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, and that's coming from a guy who I'm a self-admitted homer. I do try to stay somewhat objective, but as a fan, it certainly is hard. Let me ask you something, before we shut her down. As a guy that's watching the Oilers as much as you do, right? What's the one thing that you think Oilers fans are seeing through rose-colored glasses that if you kind of shake your head at and say, guys, come on, like that's not really the way it is, and for those Twitter folks that are listening today, be easy on Marcus if he says something too mean. We're getting an unbiased look. And the reality is I live. I'm in Calgary.
I'm a Caps
right?
fan. You can't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm in Calgary, and I watch just about as many Flames games as I do Oilers games, and I can tell a Flames fan, some of the things they think about their team, and I can tell them they're wrong, or, because from an objective point of view, I'm not, looking with the same bias. Although in some ways, I always tell everybody I hate the Flames, and my second favorite team is whoever's playing the Flames. So there is a bit of a bias there, but if there's one thing, I mean, what is it? What do you think?
In terms of like the team itself, particular players,
the fans.
over
like if you could, what's the one thing that you shake your head at with Oilers fans and say, you guys, like that's just not accurate, right? Like, is it, is there a belief in a certain player or? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think this year it's referees are against us. Now, that whether that's interference review or goalie review calls or just flat out missed call on the ice. This notion that the league does not want the Oilers to succeed, again, you got Connor McDavid. If they didn't want you guys to succeed, the last thing they wanted to do was get the player that they wanted to build their league around. So, I understand that McDavid gets hacked every 2 seconds. I see it. I don't get it either. And the example I would give is the National Basketball Association, and, I'm not a dabbler, in basketball, but I appreciate it. I watch it every now and then. The one thing I've noticed is they give their stars the benefit of the doubt. I mean, God forbid LeBron James ever can go to the basket without getting a little fingernail on him, but hey, that's a foul, so let's give him, So, hey, we got to take care of our stars. So I do not understand why McDavid takes a beating, but I'll tell you this much. So does Sidney Crosby. Have you ever seen Alex Ovechkin?
Yeah, and Johnny Gaudreau.
40 pounds. And Johnny, broke his hand. Look at the hit on Kadri on Ovechkin last year's playoffs. If anybody hasn't seen that, go on YouTube and type Kadri Ovechkin and tell me how there wasn't even a penalty on the play. He almost ended Ovechkin's career right there. So I guess the biggest thing I have is stop worrying about the refs, because what happened is, and the dichotomies last night, Dirty Vander Kane got a penalty. I mean, Jesus, shit, yeah. I mean, for the life of me, I can't understand how that's not a penalty. Forget about the ref standing right there. I've seen refs from the other side of the ring call penalties when people are right beside him. Whatever. So, he scores right after. I mean, it's shitty. The problem is I think that the whole focus point then turned not only from the players to the coach, from the players to the fans, turned into this penalty, and it shouldn't have been, and they scored, and that was one play. I mean, look at last year when you guys lost to the Ducks. I don't want to bring it up, but geez, the Kessler thing was one goal of 3 that you allowed in the last minute. Letestu had it on his stick and should have got it out. It should have been a point shot to get in, so Kessler could have fell on the goalie anyway. So it's like all these calls go against the Oilers. You make your luck. I think Struddy talks about this. You don't. There's no puck luck. I mean, Barry Trotz talks about this, and I'm going to pull my hair out all the time. Puck luck is puck. I mean, if you hit the post, you hit the post. It's not it should have went in. What do you mean it should have went in? If it went in, the red light be on, you'd be skating back to the bench, clicking hands with your guys. So stop with we hit the post, we're not getting any luck, or the ref didn't call it against us. I can tell you how. Just watch the game unbiased and see how many calls that the Oilers should have been called on them, and they're not getting called. I mean, that's what you have to start doing, because the only reason I'm saying this is not because it's right. I'm just saying this because it's not changing. Right?
Yeah.
McDavid's going to have to play with this the rest of his...
It's not going to be a popular opinion out there, right? I mean, there's... and even myself, I watched, like, last night's game, right? I mean, that's on the extreme. And, you watch... Anytime you got a superstar in your team like McDavid and you see him get hacked, you're going to get upset, right? But you're right. It works both ways. I've watched the game. I will watch the game and I'll say, wow, we got away with one there. So I'm not quite 100% biased, but yeah, you know what? There's games where it feels like the officiating is against us. I've got a bit of a theory though on that,
because what? I'm sure it is. And in a microcosm of one game, can a call win or lose you a game? Yes. And again, I have examples where it's cost the Caps a game here or there, but that's not the reason this season's going the way it is, and that's not the reason you lost to the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's not you can't chalk it all up to that for sure. It's there's a whole lot of other factors, and this season, I mean, if you could just kill half the penalties that we had, it would be a decent
They need your goalie to start making saves. I don't know if that's a popular opinion either, but again, being a Caps fan, I saw Talbot play long before he came to Edmonton. Again, there's a league out there. It's not just all here. And, he's a good goalie, but he also played on a hell of a defense. And, if any shots barely got through to him, most of the time I think Girardi made more saves than Talbot had to, or Lundqvist for that matter. Coming here, he was never going to be that goalie. Now, people then will say immediate to you, well, look at what happened last year. Well, fair enough. I'll just point back to you and say, go look at Jim Carey's record and find out what happened to him a couple years after winning the Calder and the Vezina. I mean, you bet. It happens. The Talbot's last year was better than he is, and this year's not. He's better. This year he's better than he is, and last year I think he played better than he really should have. So is he somewhere in the middle? Yeah, but I don't think that's good enough for this team right now. So that says next year there's trouble, and I think I talked about this a couple months ago. I know Low Ties was talking about it. Next year's the issue. This year's a write-off, but next year it's not looking good. Just simply for the reasons, and Strudwick's talked about it as well. Who's coming? Yep. Now I'll ask you the question. No, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but who's coming? and I mean,
there is nobody coming.
If Yamamoto comes here and scores 20 goals, that still is not going to be enough.
Yeah, no. And you asked the same question. I had Strudwick, of course, recorded a episode with me a couple episodes back. And I joked about it on my last episode because I said, Strudwick and I, who I went to high school with, Jason, by the way, I remember him from English class. I had no idea he was a hockey player even at that time. But
he went to English class?
Yeah. Actually, he's a smart fellow, but that's another subject altogether. Yeah. But,
I met him on the Calgary bus trip, but...
Oh yeah, no, he's and he's a good guy, right? Good storyteller. But he,
Absolutely.
We had this great episode. Him and I, we're chatting. I loved hearing his story about how he came to the NHL. Everything's going great, and then the last 10 minutes of our time that we had in that interview, we start talking Oilers hockey, and he asks me the same question you just asked, and it's like the bottom falls out, the pit of my stomach. Well, it's because there's nobody, right?
And I say the Capitals did it in 2004, and then they had the strike, obviously. They drafted Ovi around that time. But 2004, 2005, 2006, and I think 2007, they missed the playoffs. That's what they did. And I've seen it before. You can't just go from to be, 3 years ago to winning the Cup in 2 years. Like, getting McDavid is not a curse, but I think making the playoffs and winning a round last year was.
So what's your, and then we'll... maybe call it a night. But I want to know what your thought is, because my thoughts on Chiarelli are unpopular. I'll tell you why. It's because I would like to see him around for at least another half a season. I don't agree with all of the trades he's made. I actually think he had a half-decent trade deadline given what he had to work with. I think people overvalued the players that we had available. And also overvalued what the trade market was. So I don't think, the fans really thought that out. But when I look at this team, this Oilers team, and I think about exactly what you're saying, is who is up and coming, who's going to be in the lineup. To me, that's not Chiarelli's problem. He didn't cause that. He came into that, right? Like if Chiarelli had, if there had been a history of good scouting and good drafting and a good system in place, Chiarelli would, come in and he'd have those players ready to play this upcoming year. He'd have these guys, these, wingers that we so covet right now in the system. But instead, we've got Ty Ratty, who, I mean, he's great, but he's not ready to play. I mean, we've seen him in the last couple of games.
Yeah. No,
so that's not him. So my feeling on it is he's actually in my mind he's drafted all right. He's
fair.
got. I mean, he's had some good drafts.
We don't know yet, though.
You don't know. I guess. Yeah.
Right. I mean, none of his players are in the top 50. Now, I think if you did that now, Yamamoto probably show up there. He's been on a hell of a run. But let's be again with the rose-colored glasses. Like everybody he's drafted right now are not in anybody's other's big top list. I mean, even the Caps only have one, and that's a goalie.
Well,
tough,
Tyler
but-
Benson's getting up there. Tyler Benson's certainly close, and Maximov is another guy that those three still all three
Now,
of them playing junior today, and that's
and then Barron
Markov
Jones,
or whatever is good. Barron Jones. You know, these are guys that are going to be ready. They're not going to be ready next year, right? We might see Bear in the next couple days, right?
So don't
this
trade
is
them,
a team.
Don't trade them. Don't call them up and play them on the power play because our power play needs help. That's
exactly.
what you can't do, right? Like, even if the guy came up and helped you a bit, long term, it's not helping you. Because here's why. What happens when you do that, and this is what the Oilers get caught doing all the time, this is where the Caps are very careful. You get into bridge deals, and you don't have to pay players through the moon, right? You got to have your guys who are ready to step in at entry-level deals and contribute. I mean, Kuznetsov was making $3 million a year until this year. Braden Holtby made $3.75 the year before he won a Vezina. Like, you can't be paying these guys all 6-7 right out of their entry-level deal. Now, would I have done it to McDavid? You bet I would. And that's why they did the same thing for Ovechkin and Backstrom back in the day. So you can do that to 1, 2, and then maybe your third guy. And that's why I say your nucleus is about 4 guys. And really, if you're looking at that should be your 2 centers, your best defenseman, and your goalie. Everybody else is expendable. And that includes on my team, John Carlson likely not coming back, who is going to probably finish in the top 5 scoring this year. Now, I think he comes back, but there's a 50-50 chance that he doesn't. But, the Oilers just got to let things simmer. And I don't know if that's a word that goes well around here because, we have been to playoffs for 10 years. Well, you're not going to be in the playoffs for another 10 if you keep doing this because this is what's happening.
This is why I'm not that keen on letting go of Chiarelli just yet. And that's because, we need a bit of a strategy. He's got a strategy, whether or not you agree with it or not, but that strategy does have a little bit of patience behind it, right? And that's drafting these players and trying to build a system that really hasn't been there for the last couple of years. I'd love to see him at least give, another half a season and see what he does, right? I do, though, worry. My biggest, worry, and I think every Oilers fan would agree, is some of those major trades that he made early on, and of course the Lucic signing. Those are things that
compliance buyout.
yeah. I don't.
Just wait for the new CBA. We can get rid of Lucic.
David Staples had a good article on Lucic today, and I thought it was respectful to the player. He didn't call him out as being,
I read it.
Worthless. I thought it was, I thought it was well written. I thought he, he outlined exactly what's going on, right? He wasn't rude about it. But McClellan continues to put him on the top line, and just so sad for me. As a hockey fan, you watch this guy go out and lumber around out there. And maybe, you give him an off season and he's talking about leaning out and getting faster. And if he can do that, more power to him, earn that spot on that top line. He hasn't done it this year, in my mind.
No.
Yeah.
And I'll say this much. I mean, if he's going to go and get leaner, fair enough. I think that's a given, first off, in this day's NHL. Ovi did it last summer and he's tearing up the league this year. But what he doesn't get with, and what I don't get with Lucic, it's not about, he's not going to get much faster. Like, let's be real. Him losing some pounds may help him not, first of all, from what I understand, he's in shape. So it's not about him getting out of, like he can't last the game or anything. So if he loses a few pounds, the only thing that's going to happen is he's not going to be able to hit as much or as heavy or whatever. But the problem is not going to solve his hands. What he needs to do is go get to, I hate to say this because Adam Oates ruined the Capitals, but as a skills coach, he should be going to Adam Oates' school all summer long because that's the only thing that's going to help this guy move forward. He could lose all the weight he wants. That's not going to put the puck in the back of the net the way his hands are.
Yeah, you know what? You make a great point. And maybe on that note, we'll call it a night. Marcus, it is great interacting with you on Twitter, as always.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Oilers fans are awesome.
Yeah, and you know what? I really enjoy getting your perspective on things, that unbiased perspective. I don't always agree with you, but, that's part of what makes it fun being a fan. And when I typically I love talking to guys that are fans of other teams as long as it's not Flames. And I got a buddy that,
you're not
believe it or not, a
so
Buffalo. I've got a friend who's a Buffalo fan, believe it or not. And I enjoy watching, these teams and kind of figuring out, just like you watch the Oilers, right? Is he a Habs fan? Did you say?
No, a Hasek. Like, what are you, a Buffalo fan?
He grew up in Saskatchewan, and I think it was at the time of Barrasso, and he's he's older than I am, but Barrasso was playing, and
Foligno,
Foligno, and he said, there were only two teams to cheer for back then. Right, it was like Toronto or Montreal, and it was easy to hate. It's easy to hate Toronto, right? Because the fan base is so passionate. Just like I think if you're not an Oilers fan, it's probably easy to hate the Oilers as well. And so I think that's where he was, right?
You think going down to Orange County and claiming that it's your slogan when they live in Orange County?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure those
what it's all about.
Like, what are they drinking? No, but it's all good, right? You can't have, go to a Florida home game. I've been to one or two. I think two. I think now I forget because they're so boring, right? So it's good thing whether fans are having this year's not great, right? But if you didn't have fans, what the hell do we got, right? So whether I'm wrong, whether they're wrong, the point of it is none of us are GMing these teams, none of us are coaching these teams, and none of us are playing. So at the end of the day, we're all going to be right and we're all going to be wrong.
Yeah, we're just speculating at the end of the day. So any final thoughts or points that you want to make tonight?
Well, I think one thing that'll make Oilers fans happy is I'm certainly crossing my fingers that they get Rasmus Dahlin, and not so much because the Capitals have no chance of getting him, right? So the only other chance I get of watching some generational talent up close, like I'm lucky to do now with McDavid, is being able to watch this kid, and I can't imagine watching those two together. My God.
Yeah, that would be something. Well, I'll hope with you. But any one of those top 4, top 5 drafts this year would be an exceptional pickup for the Oilers.
We got to see a Tkachuk, eh?
If you've been following me at all, I'm a big Brady Tkachuk fan, and I hate Matthew Tkachuk. I hate him so much, I'd love him on my team.
Well, I'll throw this name out because I think the Caps will go. I'm hoping for Bodie Wild. I think he'll be around that spot.
Yeah, you bet. And you know what? It's a deep draft. It's a good draft this year, at least in the first round. For those that are still listening, the Oil Night is putting together an extensive list of CHL prospects, and I've seen the first post on it, and it's exceptional. Make sure you check that out.
Too. I follow him as well. I appreciate his senior hockey takes, and I miss working when I was with the Generals. It's a great league.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to get into that on another time, but I'd definitely love to have you back. Let's if when the playoffs happen and we can pretty much be assured that the Oilers aren't there, let's have a chat around the Capitals and see how they're doing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I appreciate your time tonight, and like I said, falling for Dahlin.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus.
Oilers Live.